Welcome back to your weekly fresh produce market update. Big news this week: potato prices plunged below the 40 Rand mark, their lowest in years, while onions continue to slide and tomatoes struggled under the weak demand at the moment. But it's not all bad news. Peppers spiked sharply, pumpkins held firm, and fruit markets showed some exciting trends. Stay tuned as we unpack the numbers, the trends, and what it means for your bottom line. Proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa. Please do me a small favor and subscribe to our channel. It will help us to improve the content and info in this video each week. But with that said, let's jump straight into the latest prices. Potato prices dropped to below the 40 Rand mark last week, averaging on 39.38 Rand per 10 kg, down 4% from last week and about 50% lower year on year. Weekly volumes, however, dropped off by about 17% week on week, but remained on relatively high levels, especially when compared to the last few years. Extra large potatoes traded on 49 Rand, large on 44, mediums at 38, and smalls now on 26 Rand per 10 kg. Mondials also came under pressure, dropping to 40 Rand, while Sephiroths reached 44 Rand. Demand is expected to stay low this week, while volumes will most likely remain on a higher level. Hopefully we can see better demand from next week onwards, which can pull up the prices slightly. But supply remains extremely high, which will limit any upward movements for now. We are still following a similar trend compared to 2022, and if we continue on that trend for now, expect prices to bottom out in October of this year. Onion prices dropped to 58.71 Rand per 10 kg, down 2% from last week and almost 3% lower year on year. Volumes dropped by 20% over the past week and is now 7.6% higher year on year. Large onions traded at 60 Rand, mediums at 66 and extra large at 51 Rand, while smalls stayed low on 38 Rand. Brown onions averaged on 56 Rand, white onions on 59, while red onions stayed on a higher level of 120 Rand per 10 kg last week. A slight price increase is expected over the next 2 weeks due to better demand expected, however not for this week, but prices are still expected to remain in a downward trend towards the end of this year due to higher supply levels also expected on the markets. Tomato prices decreased slightly to 8.51 Rand per kilogram, down 1%, while volumes dropped by about 5% over the past week. The average price is about 14% lower year on year, while volumes are now 32% higher compared to last year this time. Large tomatoes traded at 8.75 Rand, extra large at 8.85 Rand and mediums at 9 Rand. Demand for tomatoes are extremely low on the markets at the moment, which is also pulled down by the low potato and onion prices at the moment, drawing a lot of demand away from the tomato markets. So even though the forecasts indicate a slightly better price this week, we can rather see a lower price. Hopefully demand can improve towards next week when month end nears, which will hopefully stabilize this market. Carrot prices dropped sharply again to 5.26 Rand per kilogram, more than 7% lower over the past week. This price is now only about 10% higher compared to last year this time. Large carrots traded lower on 5.97 Rand, while mediums dropped to 4.21 Rand and smalls on 3.16 Rand. Compared to the last few seasons, prices remained elevated due to constant low supplies to the markets. It however seems that volumes started to catch up now, which can drive prices lower over the next month or two, especially for this coming week, which can be driven lower by lower demand. This video is proudly sponsored by Villa. With world-class solutions like Masterlock, tailored for South African conditions, Villa helps you manage risk and increase productivity with research-backed confidence. Pepper prices jumped by 15% to 27.80 Rand per kilogram due to 14% lower volumes over the past week. All variety prices also jumped, with green peppers now on 24.20 Rand, yellow peppers at 35.02 Rand and red peppers at 30.50 Rand per kilogram. We are now on similar price levels compared to 2023, when volumes also remained lower over this part of the year. If we remain on a similar trend as in 2023, we can expect prices to trade sharply lower from September until November, when volumes started to pick up over that period. Cabbage prices dropped by 2% to R2.64 per kilogram, while volumes dropped by 8% week on week. Compared to a year ago, prices are about 36% lower, while volumes remained about 26% higher. Forecasts still point to lower prices towards the end of this year. Garlic prices decreased to R67.89, with local garlic on R75.38 and imported garlic at R58.56. Spinach prices dropped 1% to R3.06 and is also likely to decrease until October of this year. Sweet potato prices decreased slightly to R4.66, but is still about 44% lower compared to last year this time, due to 72% higher volumes year on year. This will likely keep sweet potato prices under pressure for now, and is looking more and more like we will follow a similar price trend as in 2021 and 2022, when prices remained low and picked up slightly from October onwards. Pumpkin prices jumped by 13% to R5.34, now 75% higher year on year. In 2023, we also had higher than expected prices, which lasted until October. Pumpkin prices, however, dropped off sharply in November of that year, so if prices remained elevated like that year, expect it to decrease in November again. The average butternut price decreased to R7.07, green beans dropped to R16.79, and cucumbers rose by 48% to R31.35. Visit AM Trends for the latest reports, detailed charts, and free downloads. You can also click the like button if you enjoy this content. Moving over to the fruit markets, we saw banana prices dropping by 1% to R8.26 per kilogram last week, now almost 10% higher year on year. We're still on a similar price trend compared to last year, when we saw prices shooting up from this point of the year towards the end of the year. It remains to be seen if volumes will drop now, but I think we can expect a higher price over the next 3 months. Low demand over the next week, however, can limit any upward movement for the next week, of course. Apple prices kept its strong upward momentum and traded 4% higher on R11.17 per kilogram, which is now about 10% higher compared to a year ago. There are about 7% more volumes also on the markets compared to last year this time. Looking at the forecast, we are expecting a gradual upward movement towards the end of this year. Pears also increased by 3% last week and is now trading on R9.75 per kilogram, about 8% lower year on year. Pear volumes are almost 35% higher compared to last year this time, limiting any upward momentum at the moment. Based on the forecast model, volumes will likely drop off from October onwards, which can support prices over that period. Orange prices increased by 7% to R5.04 and is now about 11% below last year's price levels, with local volumes up 57% year on year. We are well below last year's price levels, but still above the levels of the 3 years before that. It looks like we are moving away from last year's price levels, however, staying lower this year, which can be due to less exports and more volumes on the local markets. I therefore expect the usual increase in prices to be later this year, especially if exports doesn't realize. Avocado stabilized on R22.93 per kilogram and is still 40% higher year on year. Volumes are about 2% higher now compared to last year this time. Feta is traded on R31, Haas on 16 and Pinkertons on R21 per kilogram. As can be seen in the graph, prices are well above the levels of the past few years. From August onwards, however, we usually see the prices trending upwards more significantly as we head towards the end of the year. But will slower exports also impact this market? If we see slower exports, it can limit this upward movement. Grapes dropped by 17% to R37.26 per kilogram, remaining 67% below last year's price levels. Pineapples decreased to R8.83, while lemons dropped by 6% to R4.96 last week. Blueberries jumped by 7% and trading now on R137 per kilogram. This episode was proudly brought to you by Standard Bank and Villa. For more detailed insights and forecasts, visit amtrends.co.za. I'm Dr. Johnny van der Merwe, and